So, other major trends also in play is that they have so many different ways to get there. It really is a new channel of cross-media mix. It's no longer silos based upon what the current status of business is. And challenges include this seamless transfer of those assets and digital design elements between each screen, and then managing these elements in a database where I can reach in and get them as a producer of content, and then moving these across the different platforms that exist today. So each screen is a different medium. Television is different than PC. Digital signage is different than television. I mean, the thinking's different, the content is different, but the result, buy something, is the same. But having that consistent message all the way across the campaign and all the way across every screen is important to a brand. And that's hard to do right now. So some of the things that you can do to try and get your arms around these digital assets is break down the silos in companies. Most companies have somebody that's doing print, somebody that's doing television, somebody that's doing web, and mobile's kind of in with the web right now, and then now digital signage is added on that also. But combining many of those into 1 to 2 decision makers that can make the decisions around that media. And it all starts by stepping back and looking at all that media rather than a single television or a single internet play. So, these are the silos we have, and this is the business of it. This is where we are today in most companies throughout the world. But you take a company like Target, for instance. They recently combined all of these things into one division that handles all their media, and one person that is in charge of all that media. It's important because if you have someone that's directing across all platforms, your message is consistent, and you're able to also get it done more cost effectively. So basically, if we take all those pieces of content and we put all that TV, web, mobile, dough, print into one area, we want to create bite-sized pieces of content. Bite-sized pieces of content so that they can be easily tagged, managed, and pulled up by the author that wants to create media for each screen. So what does that look like? Well, it really looks like a database. Once I capture this media and I capture it by whether it's by the story or by the context of how it's going to be used, the platform it's going to be used, but I have this media database that then I can take and bring pieces or layers, if you will, of that media back to the right screen. So whether it's background, action graphic, foreground, whatever it might be, all those elements I can pull out and layer into and use for each individual screen. So how do we manage that across a landscape? Again, it's take a step back, look at the entire picture of all media that's being used across that landscape, and consider those pre-design elements and smaller and separate elements. A little more detail behind that is, you want to separate it from the presentation channel. What I mean by that is you want to take and say, okay, I know I'm going to television, I know I'm going to the web, but let's forget about that for a moment, and let's step back and just look at the pieces of content that I need to deliver across both of those channels. And let's create that as a separate pieces of content that can be transported to either media. So content objects. Creating content objects that actually, so that I can tag each piece, whether it's, for instance, this diagram is from Sync, which was done by Razorfish. And so they shot these guys separately, blue screen, away from the background, and then they created the background separately so they could put them in any scene they wanted to. and they could transport that across any landscape they wanted to. So again, getting it granular and modular, bringing it down to where I can take each of those pieces and port them to any screen. So there's the three elements, or the two elements that make up the last element, the final, which was actually a web element. So in doing so, you want to create a matrix. And that matrix basically covers the platforms that you're going to have it on, whether it's all of them or three of them or two of them, whatever it might be. But let's list those platforms out in a matrix. List out the stories. What are the stories? What is the story being told? List that out. And then the assets. What assets do we need to make up this story? And again, breaking them down into absolute modular pieces and granular pieces. And then what messages we want to deliver. So as these are broken down, you want to be able to look at that matrix when you're in production and basically just check off each asset as it's being gathered and produced. Once you do that, then you can assemble these in many different ways. But again, it's breaking these down into small, granular pieces. And then after you tag these things, you have them in your database, you have it in your digital asset management system, where any author at any time can go in, do searches, get the materials they need, whether it's a motion piece, a graphic piece, it can be a printed piece, whatever it is, but bring that back and absolutely produce a final version for that particular media. This is just a quick example of what just one piece of asset would look like. Let's see if I can do this here. This is actually a composite of just somebody getting in the car. It's blue screened, green screened, and they'll composite that later over many, many different types of backgrounds. Oop, go back here. So in this situation, I can put anything across that windshield. It can be cityscape, can be farmscape, can be depending on what demographic I'm going after. There's a lot of different things I can do with an element like that and paste it across. So that's kind of the granular elements. Just to give you a couple examples of what kind of elements you want to pull together to make that possible to port that to each type of landscape. So really, as we look at the digital landscape that we have before us, with each, from print all the way to digital signage, I think one thing you really need to remember is it's a transmedia experience. And transmedia really is telling these stories across each one of these platforms and being able to have a consistent brand across those platforms, a consistent story, consistent message. So as the pathway of the consumer to purchase, they have a consistent brand and elements that they can see. So when they go to purchase, even at the shelf, it's consistent. So all the way from the beginning to end, it's a consistent message. So thank you very much.